Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. It's a late evening. It's about 3:15 in the morning. Just finished a bunch of modeling. As you can see, we're going to talk about something that's probably intriguing to some of you. Some of you know exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's called Putting Off Never. I'm making this episode because I've done it several times, and I'm also making it because I have seen it 1,000 times more than I've done it myself, because I can add up all my friends. I don't think they're doing it any more than I do it. But it's something to think about. So what is the era that we're in right now, in 2020? Hopefully you can laugh at this episode in a few months as things start to clear up. Probably going to take a few more months to go here. We are in, there's two ways you can look at this episode. One, you're doing great. You're doing great. This era hasn't affected you negatively whatsoever. And the other way you can view this is it's kicking your butt and you don't know what to do. Your normal line of work is severely injured by all this draconian stuff based on a CG image of something that probably doesn't exist. They phoned in the end of the world financially. And so you're going to have to come up with something that's going to make you happy. Doesn't always have to do with a financial situation or career. It just usually is, that's the area that is most popular. There's obviously thousands of subjects that could go into this thing that you might put off. What are the kind of things you put off? Well, you put off a business venture idea, something that you're going to develop yourself with friends and family or whatever, and you just don't. You talk about it so much, you spend all the energy, like Ray Bradbury told me, and a group of friends of mine. Don't talk yourself out of your book. If you are going to write a book, write the book. Don't sit around and talk about writing your book. Get it done and then talk about the draft of your book. And then you'll get into refinements. But I found that this was true about everything in life. You're going to make a video game. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Anything you're going to do. The more you rattle on about it, the more you lose your fascination with it. Now, sometimes, like I've said a long time ago, you can't talk yourself out of a bad idea. So sometimes laboring it in your brain is the way to go. And this isn't really... Obviously, most of us want to live in a really happy world. And so if you can endow someone with more control and more drive, even just a little pep talk every once in a while, then we're all going to benefit. There's more stability in the world. There's more happiness in the world. Because the big, giant media machine, which is hopefully about to implode, it's almost like a nightmare machine over us. They've got us addicted to this stuff, but for the very first time in November of 2020, you got people bailing on it completely, just saying, I am not going to watch any of the stuff that they control. And it is having an immediate effect on people. People are becoming happier. People are coming more easily in touch with the truth. And so while we're at it, why don't we just do a little deep dive inside of ourselves? Now, because I've been a creative person, one, I've got plenty of instances of this put off thing and it turning into nothing. It was almost as if putting off something was a psychological way of divorcing myself from something that I was either afraid of because I didn't know how to do it. Instead of jumping off the cliff and going, okay, I'm like a little baby bird. I need to learn how to fly. Otherwise, I'm going to be a fly on a windshield down there. But some people just want to take trips to certain locations. They need to make a phone call to somebody. You know, whatever it is, there's so many iterations of this. You will know if there's a list of things that you want to do, that you keep putting off, but you keep thinking you're going to do it. Now, this doesn't include, and I hope you guys will immediately understand, it doesn't include, hey, you got a trip planned in January, and once you book the trip, once you book the time, it's no longer a dream. You've got a deadline and it's going to be a reality. It's just you've put the goal post at a future date. That's all. That's not a problem at all. That's how things get done. That's what we want to do with these things that, as they always say, a goal without a deadline is a dream. Now, we want a dream. Trust me. That's how you're going to find what you want, is to dream a dream. So what we're going to do in this episode is review the whole paradigm of this process, kind of slow down time like we always do, and study why we do tend to lose track of these things, and then to sort of pump each other up here in the conversation to give us a million reasons why there was no reason for us to put it off in the first place. And the reason why is that you can always move the ball forward, no matter where you are. And I'll give you some embarrassing examples of how I've done some of that stuff. So the first thing you have to have is your idea. And I know before you click off, think about this. So some of you will be on it and you're not doing this anymore. You did it in the past and you found out that it does get delayed out of existence. And so you fixed the problem, you corrected, and you've taken things that were dreams and you've put them on the list. And so now it's just you are systematically executing them as quickly as possible with the resources that you have. And so, again, those things aren't going to be forgotten. It's not a never situation. It's just you're one person or however many people you have helping you, and you're only going to, it takes time to get things done. For instance, you want to paint 10 paintings because you're going to create a gallery. Just, going to go down and rent a gallery and try to sell your stuff. Well, it's going to take you time to paint 10 good, finished, polished paintings. And so you're in a linear situation there. You're still executing. You're going to get it done. You will. I'm sure around the 6th or 7th painting, just like me making this show, you're going to go, oh my God, I got another 4 paintings. Just think about me at the beginning of a season going, 100 episodes, 10 tens. But you just keep making them and it adds up. And what's strange about it, I'll be like, I think this is going to be something like 12 or 13. Who knows? I've got 2 or 3 in the queue now. Okay, so I'll look back at 80, at 580. I'll look back at 515. I'll even listen to it just to see how I did. And I'll be like, God, that feels like yesterday. So that's how fast time can move. Why don't you just kind of build up a pace for yourself? But why do we put things off? Now, the most dangerous one, believe it or not, is the one when you're all by yourself, you don't have any kids, maybe you're married, maybe a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, but you're putting it off when you don't really have to. Now, you could be a Tesla. You could be a person who's not really putting it off. But like he said, if anybody looked at Tesla, he said, people think I'm lazy, because he was designing stuff in his brain. You could be doing the same thing. And I have to tell you, when I write scripts, I'm writing one right now in my head. I started doing the outlining, and I kind of got everything that I had pre-planned for the last 20 years on this particular script idea. And now I'm harvesting ideas daily. Oh, God, that scene's going to be great. Sorry, I just ate dinner, and so I'm a little hiccupy. Remember to breathe. Remember to breathe. The other one that's one that we have to more strategically move around is you did have your children. You did start a new job. You did have something, fairly impactful, not negative, but impactful happen to your life. And so you're putting things off because, you're trying to resort your daily loop. And that's fine. I've got an episode on time management back in season 1 when we have close talking to the mic. I apologize, but it's all cleaned up now. Go to deepthoughtsradio.com and just type in the search field management, because there's many time episodes, but you want to see the time management one. What that does is that shares with you my daily regimen of how I manage everything that I do, which we're going to repeat a little bit here because it's pertinent, and save you perhaps going back and looking at. But that's a whole hour and a half or whatever of that particular subject matter, if that appeals to you. It is not business-like, it is human-like. It is managing your time in a chaotic environment. taking advantage of every morsel of your existence. What other things make us postpone things? Well, tragedies. And post-tragedies like this year, where they've perhaps got something that is nowhere near as deadly as they say, but they're shutting down the world because they're trying to bankrupt us all, take our property, put us on universal income, and slam dunk the New World Order. That is where I think we want to get over. Well, we want to use this technique to get out of that situation. I've recently told you that I've thrown down this year on my 3D skills, and I'm just getting started. Organic stuff's coming up here. But I'd always wanted to devote my time to Blender, because every time I got into Blender 3D, the product that I use, it was always tremendously fun. But I would constantly get kind of lost in it, and I wasn't buying courses to figure out how to do it, which are like $50, $60. Hell, some courses are $30. I've probably spent $300 on courses this year, and it just utterly changed my life. And I haven't even finished 40% of them, because in the first 60% of watching the ones that I needed, it got me moving so fast through what I need, that I'm going to go back and do that when I run into some obstacles, because right now I'm developing fluently. So the interesting thing is that when you have a crisis occur, sometimes, believe it or not, that is the best time to re-engage the things that you've put off. One, because they might actually be things that'll make you happy existing on planet Earth. And in a crisis, it's nice to have a little happy place. Secondarily speaking, you can probably make money at it. And so that's a nice little alternative as well. There's nothing better than hanging out with people who are in control of their lives. They're not perfect, man. They got flaws. They probably have big mistakes floating around them like all of us do. But we can deal with the mistakes as long as we have successes coming in. And of course, when you try something new, just like the old Edison light bulb story, he supposedly made 10,000 light bulbs before one turned on and stayed on. All right, whether that's true or not doesn't matter. The truth is in the analogy, or in the metaphor of what he was saying, or what was said about him. How do you track your ideas? Let's say you had a list. Say I'm mentioning this subject and you're like, oh yeah, I got that thing. I'm not even going to tell anybody, but when I watch this episode, I'm going to think about the thing that I put off, and then we'll see if he can inspire me to engage it. Well, I heard something recently that I think I've shared in an episode that I haven't released yet, but it was about PTSD. And it was, PTSD is now recognized as a lost event in time, which left a trauma behind, but you lost the origin of the trauma, and therefore you're unable to deal with it psychologically because you just lost it. Remember, someone hit you on the back of the head and then beat you up or something. You don't remember the event because your short-term memory takes about 10 minutes to store in your long-term memory in a lot of cases. And so here you wake up bruised and battered, but you can't remember how it happened. But when it was happening to you, you were going through major stress. And so you've got this loop of that major stress nightmare inside you, but you can't find the event to go, what's causing this PTSD I've got? This trauma I'm feeling in my chest. And so therapy is manyfold. But one of the therapies is if you can remember the event, or if someone tells you about what happened, but you weren't there. One of my friends and business partners for a really long time got in a motorcycle accident. A woman turned left in front of him. They were going about 45 miles an hour. No one else on the highway. For whatever reason, it was just one of these retarded things that she did. And broke his femur in half. He lost a 3/4 of an inch off his leg. But he's a big maverick surfer, wore all the gear, so he saved his own life. But he lost like a giant, 90% of his hearing in one ear. It was just bad. He doesn't remember the event at all. But he didn't have any trauma necessarily, so he just moved on. All right. Why am I talking about PTSD in the middle of this episode? Because one of the techniques to cure PTSD we can use to bring these put off moments into reality such that they don't seem so distant, they don't seem so mysterious, and they don't seem so freaky or terrifying to engage. This technique is to write down everything about this idea that you have with a pen and paper. If you like pencil, do pencil. You can burn the piece of paper when you're done. But moving it out of the right side of the brain onto paper with the written hand is a left brain activity. So what you are doing is introducing the left half of your brain, which is the execution side of your brain, to get instructions executed inside the CPU that we call our mind. And so now both sides of your brain understand that there's this reality out there, this goal. Who is going to scare you away from, what part of your brain is going to scare you away from a potential goal? It most likely won't be your left brain. Your left brain is like, what shall we do? And the right brain's like, hey man, I think we should do this thing, man. We should build surfboards, man. Okay, let's do that, Now your left brain might say, we don't have any money to do that, And your right brain's going to be like, hey man, I don't know, you got to find that. And so now both of them can work together. And that's going to make you double, triple, quadruple powerful in seeing what you want to do. If you're like me, what ends up occurring is you will write something down in a book. I've got dozens and dozens of laboratory gridded notebooks with just miles of information about my philosophy of the universe, my theories of physics, my theories of the mind and the body and the soul and all this crazy stuff. I even invented crazy ways of writing, whole new fonts that it's funny. People can't read it until I teach them how to read it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that is English." I'm like, "Yeah, that's weird. I didn't see any of the letters before. I just saw gibberish." And I was like, "You see it clearly now, right? Yeah, great. Okay, so you write it down. And then you don't really have to ever read it again. Because when you wrote it down, you forged it into this universe. Now, I'm going to give you a gamey thing to think about. But keep this in the back of your head as you live your life. I remember one time I was making spaghetti with my dad. We're living in Massachusetts in this little tiny apartment in Randolph, Massachusetts. And I was talking about God with my dad, which he never really talked about that kind of stuff. But he did think about it. It's just interesting. I just need to kind of prod my father into having the discussion, and then he had answers sometimes. Other times he would just totally inform me about something. Okay, so I said, Dad, does God read our minds? And what was tremendous about this moment was my father just looked at me and just goes, he just shook his head no, for those podcast listeners. And I remember thinking, wow, he just has the answer. That's very convenient. Now, as I got older, I was like, well, my father obviously doesn't know whether or not God reads my mind. So that little question hovered with me. Now, I don't know why writing things down seems to forge them into reality way faster than any other technique that I know, including anything digital that you might do. I'm going to repeat something that my good buddy's grandson, who's this prodigy kid, like mega prodigy kid, his school, which is a very special school for his high IQ, gave all the kids iPads because it's kind of a nice school. And he was reading books through this thing for his schoolwork. But this kid could devour probably about, without a joke, 2,000 to 3,000 pages of paperback books a week. That's just who he is. He's the most humble kid on planet Earth. I swear to God. You would never know. He's a handsome kid. He's probably 6'5" now, and he's 18 years old or 19 years old. But he told his grandfather, who was a very prominent special effects guru, heirloom to the industry. He said, Grandpa, you know what? He goes, I can't remember anything that I read on an iPad. But if I read it in a book form, paperback, he goes, I could recite it to you. Interesting, isn't it? Digital data doesn't recall well in the mind. Now, some of you probably had a pretty good experience with that. But then again, if you read your favorite little novel by somebody and, no one asks you about what you read, because after high school, you don't have to give book reports, or after college, you don't have to write essays or something. You may not be realizing that you don't really remember much about the book. You may remember the premise. You may have some scenes that you really liked, but read War and Peace and then try to figure, if you've never read it before, and see how much you can remember if it's purely digital. Then find some other book, read Brave New World or something on paperback, and see how much you remember that one. There's something about non-flickering information in our mind, putting us in a state of suggestibility, even getting us closer to a theta dream state while we're reading a book. So, what I have done with that little answer my father gave me is the following. I've mixed these two pieces of information together. One, I think there's a scientific reality about our mind ingesting data written on paper. Think about it. As we went more digital, our kids got stupider. It's just that simple. I've owned, I don't even know, literally speaking, probably 500 to 700 books in my lifetime. I keep them in a cycle, usually when the libraries are open, and I donate them back. I buy them and I donate them, I should say. I can remember books that I regret getting rid of. Even if I would pull it up and go, oh yeah, that's all bad information, and then hand it off again. I just regret getting rid of a bunch of my robotics books, a bunch of my electronics books. I've got some heirlooms in there, but I regret giving away some of these things. But the other half of it is I am a deep believer, as Michael Jackson apparently was a huge believer in this, and he and I are born on the same day, which is really odd. He's the only other human being that I've heard articulate what I've told you, and it just happened recently. He believed that God gifts you with things, like Steve Jobs talked about catching the butterfly. That's an idea. You must catch this delicate thing called a butterfly, which is your idea. It's floating in the universe, and then you have to take care of it because it's a very fragile being that has a very short lifespan. So you must get everything from the butterfly into yourself before it dies. And that's the key. Now, what if, let's say God can read your mind, but what if he engages in a little bit of privacy? Obviously, he could read your mind if he exists, but maybe he's not the only one playing in the universe at our level. Perhaps our relatives and other aliens that have never been human before are the poets and the music writers. But they're not allowed to invade our consciousness just because of a little agreement. But if you articulate with your voice outwardly in a little session by yourself, whether in your car, in your living room, whatever, you are saying to the universe what you want with your mouth. Or better yet, you're writing it down with a piece of paper, thus transferring the information from creative land to execution land, from right brain to left brain. Boom. It has nothing to do with maybe spirits or anything, but you're actually completing the pipeline of requirement to your left brain. I do think divine things occur because when I was a professional musician in the 90s, I would go to my studio, everything's on, it's on all the time, so I can always write whenever I want to. I try to write something, and oh my God, I got nothing. And then I go lay out in the sun for a few hours, come in, and get to my studio, and all of a sudden I just touch the keyboard, and a two-handed song comes out, and I'm singing lyrics I've never heard before, and everything is amazing. It's the best piece I've ever written to that date. And so I felt like it was given to me. In fact, there was a calling. I was going to take a shower because I was all sweaty in that one particular day. And boom, I get called into the studio, and there it is. Now, what would be my outward activity to the universe to tell it I want to write a song? Having gone in there first and tried for, 15 minutes to write something, which before was, I don't get writer's block that much. But musically, it's much easier to get blocks because you'll get in loops of your old stuff and you'll be trying to write something new and you realize you're just crawling right back into your last song you wrote. So, okay, now I write film. Well, I have notebooks and notebooks full of ideas, fully mapped out Sid Field Act 1 through 3 treatments, which now I split into 4, to write a script. So I've told the universe I got this idea, or maybe the universe goes, let's see if he picks up on this frequency. Bop, 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 bop. And then I'm all of a sudden, oh my gosh, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. I find that if I keep my notebooks away from me, I don't get those epiphanies because I don't have anything to write it down with. It's like the universe goes, get a notebook. This is the way it works, bro. Just sitting there and writing it out. Sid Fields, by the way, has a great little graph he draws to make this kind of stuff happen, which allows you to sit there and meditate on your idea. So if you have something that you know you've put off, or if something occurs to you moving forward from this point, I want you to try all these things. Again, you want to kill all the birds with one stone, get a notepad and paper, something nice, okay? My suggestion, I get I think they're called scientific notebooks. I think it's a Mead product, an MEAD product. I don't know if there's an E on the end of that or not, but they're about $20 a book, but they're grid paper, which is good in case you have to draw a little diagram of something. And they last forever. I've never had any one of them perish, but all those little notebooks you get from the convenience store or the drugstore, the ones that are like the crappy ones you used to use in grade school or whatever, those melt away. They're thin paper. You don't want to feel like you're 6 years old, I think, when you're creating an adult idea. So these laboratory notebooks, which have kind of a brick red cover on it, they're spiral bound. I think they have like 200 pages in them, something like that. The pages are numbered and they have graph paper in them. They're worth every penny. You can buy them little bundles. They're a little expensive, but again, we're talking about something that's going to last your whole life, and you could hand this stuff down to your kids. Now, just to recap, you will run into situations where you had a dream when you were, well, let's just put it this way, forget your age. You had a dream 10 years ago, you put it off and it never happened. Now you've had 10 years of growth. Depending on the stress of life, you may have grown a lot more than 10 years in that 10-year period. Hell, it could be just last year and you've had a really rough ride, and so you're much more mature and your priorities have shifted. It's absolutely fine. Don't feel guilty. If you do write it all out and you realize, gosh, I don't really have any love for this anymore. I'm not afraid to do it. I got the time to do it. I got the resources to do it, but I just don't want to do it. That's cool. I just want to put that at the beginning in case you need to change your idea. Another one that precedes a lot of this kind of stuff is the notion that maybe you don't have any idea, but you know that you should. You're the kind of person that executes in the past, and you just need to dream up an idea. So sometimes meditating with a notepad and a pen, magic will occur, okay? But let me throw this at you too. If you are still fighting the initial inertia to execute, to do anything, remember this, because there's a ton of people out there that fall into this category. I have fallen into this category at times and had to kick my own ass to get out of this problem, which is the following. If you get a job with someone, well, put it this way, let me restructure the question, or so I structure the statement correctly. Some folks can only execute amazing stuff as long as someone else is telling them to do it. They're the consummate employee, They're the E bracket of Robert Kiyosaki's cash quadrant, where he's got an E, an S, a B, and an I. You're either an employee, you're a sole proprietor, you're a business owner that employs the E's, or you're an investor who makes the rest all happen sometimes. Well, when I find myself going, geez, just as long as someone gives me a paycheck, I have such an obligation because of my moral base growing up in the Midwest, I'll execute that thing to the best of my ability. I mean, I've never let down an employer in my life that I'm aware of. Okay, so why wouldn't I take that energy and power and skill home and do my own thing in addition to doing the thing for the paycheck? Again, when I was 19 years old and got my first job drawing video games, I'm sitting in this beach house in Oxnard, California. And this dude came in who looked a bit like Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was kind of interesting. And I didn't know who this guy was. And to this day, I don't know who he was. But I'm so glad he showed up. Because he's talking to somebody else in the room. And I think I was learning how to draw animated characters in these cells. And was it Super Paint or whatever it was, Pixel Paint or Deluxe Paint. That's what it was. And he's talking about the transition from his mind from being an E to an S, to being a sole proprietor. And he said, why should I work 8 hours for someone else when I can work 12 for myself? Now, I'm 19 years old. And I remember it's one of these situations where he's talking to somebody else, but he turns to me and he kind of throws up his hands and he finishes his sentence looking straight at me. So I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh, you're right. Now, at 19, I lacked the knowledge to execute exactly that. But technically speaking, I was sort of self-employed. I was a freelance artist for this company called Atomic Entertainment at the time, which was a subsidiary of Activision. All right. Then there's the other little past Chotsky you can lean on, which is the following. At some point in your past, let's say that you're over 35 at least. Somehow in your 20s, you were kicking ass and taking names, baby. Nothing could stop you. You even look back at your own past and you're like, damn, I did that. And then you look at the present and you're like, why am I not doing that now? And you look at your spouse and your children and your bills and you're like, well, that's why. When we're not talking about making goals necessarily that don't pay the bills. Maybe if the one that you have that's gnawing at you doesn't necessarily equal money, which usually it does. You know, it's crazy. Let's say we have a listener who used to, I don't know if he does it now, but he used to build armor, like medieval armor pieces, mainly helmets and that kind of stuff. But he knew how to do anything, I'm pretty sure. Of course, if you never created a breastplate, it'd take him a while to figure out how to make that happen. But that was just a hobby of his, and he would send me pictures of these things, and they were just tremendous. All right. Well, I guarantee you there's a bunch of cosplay people out there and people that go to these medieval, Renaissance fairs who would pay major bucks to have one handmade for them. And there's some things about measuring heads and that kind of stuff. So my buddy would have to have some kind of sample head that he would, be able to use as a template. But he can get it done for sure. I got 100% faith. Several of our listeners are musicians. In fact, some of them are just phenomenal. In fact, no one sent me crap yet. Let's put it that way. But one of our listeners, Ronnie, he's like, he sends me a picture of his studio. I'm just sitting out here in the patio doing something. And I'm like, oh, you do, I'm probably doing the intro actually. I said, you do music? Yeah. And he starts linking me his albums. And, it's always one of those situations where you kind of get that cringy feeling like, oh gosh, this could be really bad. And then all of a sudden I'm listening to stuff that's like Jean Jarre. It's like Tomita or Tangerine Dream kind of stuff, but then updated with modern beats. And I was just like, I'm sitting here blown away. Plus the guy has like, I don't know how many hours, but he's got hours of his stuff. And I'm sitting there privileged on this patio listening to music that maybe no one's ever heard before. I don't know. And I'm getting my own private little concert out here. So inspiring while I was doing my 3D stuff. He never stopped, right? And so he didn't stop using it, so he never lost it, one of those things. What I want you to do is, if you are facing one of these situations where you have, because there's going to be two types of people. Probably most of us have done something fairly unknown and incredible in our lifetime. Meaning, man, I never done that before, and I got invited to help. Maybe you apprenticed someone, and my gosh, it turned out great. And maybe you didn't do everything because someone else was in charge. But you know that when you were done, and you had seen the other person do those other things, you see either that you could do it right away if someone just said, okay, now you do it. You could have done it. Or with very little extra practice, you could have achieved at least a basic level of mastery to, get it done to a commercial level, something that could be sold. Yeah, maybe someone holds up the helmet from the master and holds up yours, and they're like, you can see refinements that this dude did. This guy's going to probably charge 10 times as much, but you can survive off the 1X version of the price, right? So some of you have that past. So it's important every day of your life to remember you're still that person. You're not only still that person, but you are probably mathematically better than you were. Hey, you might have to shake some rust off and blow some dust out of your system. But what I always tell my students and kids that I teach artwork to, which I haven't been able to do this year, which sucks. As I say, art is one of the most mathematical things you can get involved in. For little kids, what I tell them is I'll draw something kind of neat in front of them so they can see me do it, and they can see it come from nothing to something. And I'm using their pen, their crayons, their whatever, so they know I'm only using what they brought. And I'll say to them, you know what? Do you think you could draw this? And usually, it's just 50-50, yes or no. But if they say no, I say, can you draw the alphabet, A through Z? Oh, yeah. Well, do it. Bing, 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 bing. I said, okay. So what I do is I take my drawing that I did, and I show them every stroke of the pen that I did is in the alphabet. So I say, see that? That's just the letter A. Oh, yeah. That's just the letter O. Oh, my gosh. And I show them. I say, so you have all the mechanical skills necessary to draw anything that's in your head. Just look at anything in the world and see the alphabet and draw the alphabet. Sometimes we just need people to connect those dots for us so that we can have faith in ourselves. So the other half of the population, perhaps you have a dream that is well beyond anything that you've ever done before. All right, well, coming from a guy that does things I've never done before, usually every year of my life, you just have to brace yourself for the process. What I always tell my students in college, when I teach at art schools or film schools, is I take them through the average project. That's going to be a long project because these kids are going to be working on either television shows or film, or a lot of them, I speak on video game creation as well. An average video game that's of any AAA level is going to take you 2 years, sometimes 10. Depends on what product you're working on. But I say, okay, so you've got 100%. We're going to break down 100%. And what I always say to folks is there's the fun 40. The first 40% is all conceptual. You're just running your mouth. Well, it's going to be cool. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Now, no work's getting done except the conceptual design. And this is really a good phase because it's sort of that brainstorming phase, right? You're dreaming. Why not? Dream everything you possibly can. And look at your competition and blow them away with your dreaming. My suggestion is always to come up with 3 or 4 things that would blow away your competition. If you get all 4 executed, then you're going to be laughing all the way to the bank. But even if you only get one thing, that's what your customers are going to remember. Well, this product does this one thing, and I can't live without it. Like Blender 3D is now blowing away Houdini. It's definitely blown away 3D Max already. It's blown away Maya already, which is why it's taking over the industry, and it's free. Okay, well, that design crew is looking at the rest of the world going, why don't they just do this? And then they do it first. Boom. Okay. The next phase is your sort of reality 50%. This is where you're going to really separate the boys from the men. Because you're going to have to start doing some work. You're going to find out who comes to work on time, who works 12 hours a day, who works 8 hours a day, who can actually do what they conceptually said they could. And, you can get your butt kicked every once in a while where you run your mouth and you can't do it. I've had artists do this to me. I've had programmers do it to me. And it could be that they get things done, but they're done so poorly that it's sort of going to inhibit the product from running properly. Like badly written code that does the right thing sometimes runs so slow you can't release it. So you got to get someone in there yourself. You got to rewrite the code. I've had an artist who was a huge Marvel fan. He wanted to work on these 2 Marvel games we had for Marvel, and he choked hard. God bless him. He tried, and he just oversold it to himself. And he had months. He had 3 months to fail. And I had to come in and draw the game in like a month. So I'd been the CEO for a long time, and I used to draw games, and I was doing a bunch of other design on the side, different stuff, but I had to get in there and draw games. And so it was cool for me because I was like, okay, let's jump off the cliff. Learn how to fly. So we got 10% left. The fun 40 is sort of make it or break it 50. I break down the 10% into 2 pieces. There's 9% and 1%. It's called the Grueling Nine. The Grueling Nine is about if you thought that the 50% of actually making whatever you're talking about was difficult, depending on how your skill set is. Now, you may have all the skills in the world, and it's mainly just you dedicating the time and getting it done. But the 9% that I have run into is where the second tier of stress, the second tier of inner communication starts to break down, meaning people are starting to get so kind of fed up with the product, or you've seen it too long. Like when you make a video game or a movie, you've seen the movie so many times in the editing room, let's just say, that you're tired. If you're writing the music for the movie, you've seen scenes, hundreds of times. So some dudes kick this stuff out and it's no big deal. But some folks really stress over it because they want it to make it an epic situation for their career. And so they stress. The old techno band Kraftwerk used to sit on top of their albums for years and years. I recently found out that their Music Nonstop, which I think it was called Electric Cafe, was the name of the album, which was a smash hit in my world. I mean, I used to roll down Main Street and that this song, those songs playing in my car, and people were just running up to the door going, what is that? I need that. I found out later, just recently, that it was considered a flop. It's just really strange. Now they're super famous for that album. It's just how it's weird when you make stuff that's beyond anyone else's comprehension, like Picasso getting into Cubism. Everyone thought he was out of his mind putting 2 eyeballs on one side of someone's face, and now you can't afford those mistakes, supposedly, that he made, right? But this is where, if you're working in a team, the last 9% is where you're going to have to stop. This is what I always do with the teams, and I say, okay, look, we're in the last 9%. I think we've crossed the barrier, because you never quite know. But we say, okay, so we're going to start getting a little stressed with each other. So if anybody says anything to anyone else that's a little bit inappropriate, if any one of you blow up or something like that, and I usually don't hire people like that. I don't think in my company I ever had that. I blew up on the neighbor who was making a mess outside one day, but my crews have been pretty good. But I've seen it happen in other teams at EA. You have to communicate that just blow it off. Take it. If someone needs to blow off, everyone just needs to take it. If he's like, screw you and you're useless and just sit and take it, because tomorrow morning he's going to go to bed or she's going to go to bed and we're going to wake up and be friends again. It's just a process. The last 1% of any project you're in is what I call the last man standing. When I used to do the Macintax / TurboTax product, we got down to that final golden master, final candidate, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. I will tell you this, physically speaking, at the end of every day, there would be my manager and myself awake, and everyone else was asleep. Even the other programmers were asleep. And we would be up testing and fixing bugs, and we're putting bugs in that other people have to fix the next morning, but trying to do such a good job in the QA database that they would have all the information they would need to find a bug. But you got to brace yourself, for sometimes you will hit a barrier in your goal that feels like God is telling you this isn't what you're supposed to be doing because it's getting so hard. What you need to know is the trick of the industry. Now, I want you to pick anyone in your brain. It's a little magic trick here. Pick anyone in your brain that is your hero for getting things done. Any genre of anything. I'm going to tell you right now that whether they're dead or alive, if we had access to them right now, and I could interview them about this process, and I explain what I'm about to say to you, they're going to say, absolutely. That's exactly how it is every time you break new ground. Now, if you're going back for seconds and thirds, you're getting better and better. This phase will perhaps not even occur. So if you're working in a job right now for somebody else and you're executing beautifully, but when you bring it home, it seems a little more daunting because you're having to tell yourself to do it every day. You may not run into this as deeply because you're already skilled at this thing. But it plateaus out. It plateaus out at this seeming infinite difficulty sometimes. What the most professional people in the world do is they know that they are so close, that feeling that it is infinitely difficult, thus impossible, thus you're never going to complete this goal. It's going to float away into the atmosphere as a dream because you couldn't execute it to completion. They know that that feeling means, it's like a little secret message from God, that you are right next to the best success that you've ever had in your life. When I was doing the intro, I was trying to put myself in the room and trying to get all this lighting done and all this like special lighting and things. I definitely want to make it better, but I had to get it done at some point because you guys are waiting months for the show to start. I had that feeling. In fact, there were days that I had been working on this thing and you don't know how many Fridays I told myself I'd have the intro done by Monday, and it just, I had Stanley Kubrick in my brain going, I would never light it like that, and you're copying my set, so you're not allowed to release this until you figure out the volumetric lighting in this room. And there were things I just had never done, and I know it takes about a week to learn something to a decent level of perfection if you work every day, 12 hours a day. And that's what I did. And poof, we have something that's at least acceptable as the intro. But when you crack it, man, it is the most euphoric feeling of your life. And if you are one of the last men standing, this is a androgynous reference for you ladies, you will have this weird tingly feeling in your system that you made it. And you're not done, but it's going to get done now. You've crossed the speed bump. And going backwards is more difficult than just driving past it. So keep that in your back pocket as you're dealing with the stress of completing what you want. Now, there is another technique that is only for some of you, and you're going to know if this is for you. It's no big trick. But I've talked about, like the Tony Robbins technique, which is one of his big techniques is map negativity to the things that are keeping you away from your goals and map positivity to the stuff that is getting you closer to your goal. Sometimes you have to rearrange your brain because you were growing organically and you weren't policing the way that you were growing. And when you want to execute, you then have to grab a hold of your brain and control it. You must get up. You must go work. Don't go to bed yet. You're not finished. Pretend like you're your own client and you got deadlines against yourself. Pretend, if you have to, pretend you got a client that doesn't exist. If you need to, put a poster on your wall of somebody and just say, Farrah Fawcett's my client. Gene Simmons is my client. Whatever you got to do. There's some old references for you. Whatever you have to do to convince yourself to do the work. Maybe you have to engage a pretend paradigm that has worked in other formats when it wasn't pretend, like working for someone else. I want to give you a funny little story about being up against an impossibility that you think you can't solve. This is going to be a funny little story. We were making a pinball game, must have been 1994, at EA. Could have been 93, but I can't remember. We played this pinball game, and it was fun, little flippers, and it looks pretty cool. And every time we played the game for a long period of time, and we had an outside developer, the ball would disappear, and the game would lock up. And we're like, that seems impossible. How could the ball disappear? And the game and the processor go nuts on the computer. And so we're like, where did the ball go? Did it go off screen and it's just flying in some direction? All right. We were almost done. I mean, the game was like absolutely perfect in its physical form. The gameplay was fantastic, but this one thing would happen. We didn't know what, and you have to play it for a while. Some magic thing, some combination of events that would occur. Well, the developer was kind of pissed at us for showing him the videotape of this thing and just kind of going, you have no other information about what you did to get it to happen? And we're like, nah, man, we're just playing the game. And so the dude was trying to track left and right flippers. And eventually the dude came up with an idea. Very basic idea. Sounds totally trivial when you hear the solution. But he put a little register on the screen that let us know the X and Y Cartesian coordinate position on the screen of where the ball is. It just updates like crazy. All right. Not terribly useful when you're playing the game, but when this bug happened, that was the key. And this is just funny as hell. You know, if you've ever played a pinball machine or you've ever seen one, you've got the flippers, and right above the flippers, you got two bumpers, almost in every every pinball machine. And there's usually bumpers and stuff, or kickers and that kind of stuff, I should say. Well, this ball was getting stuck. It was you could get it to move so fast at one point because it starts building up speed. And if you rolled the flippers really well, the ball kept gaining its acceleration. Its velocity was increasing and increasing. This thing was jumping so many frames per second that would actually leap from in the field of the pinball machine where you could see it into a kicker. I think it was flying into a lot of different objects, but the one place we found it was it got stuck inside the kicker. Well, the kicker itself was an obstacle that you couldn't pass through because it's what it does. It's an obstacle in the 3D engine. But when you get inside of an obstacle, all the ball was doing was bouncing back and forth super duper fast inside the kicker. But you couldn't see it. And because there was no physics inside the kicker to kick it out, it just sat in there. And when we started looking at the readout, we just saw like two digits going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we're like, you know, what the hell? Because we didn't know exactly where that was in the screen physically. Showed that videotape to the coder, and he's like, God damn it, we've got stuck in a flipper. Or stuck in a kicker, excuse me. Boom, problem solved. And guess what? For the rest of our lives, no matter if we became developers, designers, whatever, if any bug ever happened like that again, we knew exactly we knew to check that one off the list. Make sure the ball's not going so fast. And so what the guy ended up doing was calculating a line ahead of the ball and trying to see if it was going to get stuck, and then he would collide with the object before he jumped inside the object, thus shortening the distance and keeping the game going. It was actually a pretty gnarly fix for the CPUs back in those days. So, the moral of that story is you are going to tread on usually new ground. Let me give you another scenario. Whatever dream you have that you're putting off, a lot of times you've never done it before in your life. You want to write that book. You've never written a book before. You've read tons of books. You know how they're arranged. There's an outline you usually come up with first, even if it's fiction. But if you're writing a factual book, it's much easier. You just need to cover all the bases, make sure it's comprehensive. If you're going to pitch a book to a publisher, they want to see the outline first. If you're going to write your life story, well, you better have a pretty decent ending with some pretty amazing turns that no one else has. It needs to make people laugh. It needs to make people cry. It needs to help people look inside themselves so that the book is meaningful to them. And if it's factual, it needs to be true. So let's say you've worked at a big company. This is something I learned in starting my own company. So I started at the bottom and worked my way to the top. All right. So that's a nice little thing to say. I started out in tech support. I moved all the way into engineering in about 4 months. And I would just always, I was drawing the manuals, drawing the fonts, drawing the icons. Anything I could do, I always did it for everybody. All right. Great, hoorah for me. When I had to start my own company, what starts to become the reality that I find out? Well, I never handled accounting. I never wrote contracts. I finally got into upper management and went to contract school and that kind of stuff and learned how to do negotiations, like I said in a previous episode. But without those formal steps, I didn't know how to do it. So I had to rent offices. We had an office in LA. I had an office down here in Costa Mesa. Well, you got to sign the lease. You got to make sure you don't get screwed on your lease. Make sure you're not paying too much for your square footage. You got to buy a phone system, your internet. You got to take care of setting up all the bank accounts, getting your checks, filing your fictitious business license, filing your LLC or your C Corp. All those things. And you have to keep track of all that data because eventually, you're going to hand it off to someone who's going to take care of it for you. You don't want to hand off a piece of crap. And you don't want to get yourself in trouble with the IRS or state laws or all that kind of stuff. So there's two ways you can perceive this. You can perceive it like a lot of us. You're so excited that you're executing your own idea and working for yourself that even though these things are daunting and freaky, you're executing your idea and you couldn't be happier. So how do you find the time to do all this? So let's start plagiarizing a little bit of our previous episode with a much better mic system. Time management is gigantic. And let me just use a little analogy here. We know that in today of 2020, we are absorbing false paradigms of reality every split second. Social media's entire goal from DARPA is to erode the mind of man. I'm going to do an episode about this KGB guy who defected in the 80s and told us about the plan that they did to destabilize the United States. And he claimed in 85 that he was done, that they were done as he defected to America. But I just saw a lecture he gave where he was teaching, and I have to watch it again because pound for pound, this lecture was breathtaking. The video's all screwed up, but the voice is perfect. You will undoubtedly, even if you don't have any other issues in your life, you will adopt paradigms about how much time you have to get things done. It involves every sector of your life. Sort of like writing a movie, if you're married, then you need to set aside time, quality time with your spouse. If you're going to jump off on a venture, one, be careful involving your spouse in the venture because you don't need extra stress. But some of you have unique relationships with your spouse, and your spouse would be a keystone to your success. Maybe the two of you are going to start something together. If you get a magical relationship like that, more power to you. But we're told, that we don't have time. And what's very interesting about it is if I explain this thing 20 years ago, or say 25 years ago, I would have probably more people arguing back against what I'm about to say, but every second of your life can be used to get your goal. And I mean every second. Today, we know for a fact that we're inside our digital devices all day long. You go to the bathroom, you go to number 2, and you're sitting there looking at your phone. Even if you're a lady and you sit down ever for anything, you look at your phone. You're done with your visit to the restroom, but you're still responding and doing something. Why do we have so many car wrecks with young kids and even adults who are texting on their telephones? Because they're trying to drive a car and use the full functionality of the hand-eye coordination linguistics of a typewriter, which just absolutely overwhelms the brain with function to the point you no longer have decent input for your driving. We have proven to ourselves in the 21st century that we have tons of time, hours and hours and hours of time that previously we were wasting not getting our goals. Well, now you have proof. Only you know how much you watch TV, look at the internet, do anything other than your goal. You're not being with your spouse, even if you're sitting next to him or her. You're on your phone. You go to a restaurant. Both of you jump on your phones and you're talking to each other. Your kid's yapping at you. Daddy, 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 mommy, mommy, mommy. And you're like, wait, honey, I've got to post the fact that Sean Connery died. I'm going to be the first person to say it. I got a new boyfriend or girlfriend. I got to tell the world that someone loves me. You're wasting away in these social media platforms, ingesting some fake news or whatever. Hey, if there's ever a reason to cut all that stuff off and re-engage your reality, your kids, your spouse, your family, your friends, it's because all that stuff is crap out there. Now, we know that I think almost every adult and I would say if you're 25 years old, you probably had this occur to you. You've had ideas in the shower. It just happens. You will go to sleep at night with a problem that's not solved. It'll rack your dreams a little bit, but you'll wake up, hop in the shower, and your mind just goes, there's the solution. Whatever it is, what you should say to a friend or family member, you're writing some code, and oh my God, yeah, that's it. You're doing something, and you get those little epiphanies. The universe knows you went to bed without finishing that. They know you're exhausted. I'm not going to blame you, so they lay off you. They don't give you any more information or ideas or inspiration, let you have a good night's sleep, and when you wake up, poof, all of it's there. I want you to cannibalize every second for your goals. Relax as well. Don't think about anything every once in a while, okay? But if you got energy, go get your coffee, whatever it is. You're driving to work every day. What if you got a 30-minute commute where you're spending at least an hour in traffic every day? Talk to yourself. Talk out your ideas. Pitch your story. Just don't tell the rest of the world you're doing it until you've gotten past, I would say, the critical 50. You're doing your fun 40, you're 50 after that. Then you can start sharing it with people. I think that a lot of you who've been on the show for 5 years and you were on MK Ultra before, you know that the way I operate is a bit like Santa Claus, a bit like Willy Wonka. My neighbors think I'm Willy Wonka, okay? What's the story in the movie 1973? They don't see anyone going in and they don't see anyone coming out. But the trucks come out with that Willy Wonka chocolate. It's just phenomenal with these new inventions, these new candy bars that everybody has to have. Thus, when he ran the contest for the golden ticket, it was a gigantic mystery what was in there. They wanted to see it because no one had ever seen it before. Well, there's a lot of musicians that used to work that way. Michael Jackson used to work that way. Prince used to work that way. Prince was the ultimate musician that did that. One, because you knew everything this guy did would completely divorce his previous album. If you love the previous album, you have no idea what's coming next. You don't. You just rely on him and trust him that if he can please himself, you're going to be pleased too. Steve Jobs, remember that? Oh yeah, there's just one more thing. And he'd save this amazing debut at the very end of a show at the Flint Center. People got addicted to that. Got to see what Steve's going to drop at the end of this Apple Expo. And he never failed to deliver. Even if no one bought that Cube, it was still cool to see the debut. Of course, the Cube is now turned into the Mini, which is one of the most popular computers outside of their main lineup. If you have a family, think about it. Dad, mom, they're out in the garage, they're up in the attic, they're down in the basement, you got the special room in the house, and you're creating something. And they want to know. You're a little Santa Claus. Well, they always go in there and do something cool. I saw them taking in boxes. I saw them went to the art store. Dad bought some new tools. I hear wood cutting in the garage, but he's not letting us in there to take a look. And that gives you a little bit of a quarantine from people kind of, sometimes they can piss on your parade and they're not trying to. One of the things that I used to always do to trick people, it was annoying as hell at first, but when you're a portrait face illustrator, there's ways that you can draw such that you will finish every area that you're drawing. And so everybody knows what you're drawing. They look at oh yeah, you got her eyes perfect, and you got her mouth perfect, and da-da-da-da. What I do is I draw in sort of a outline first, and then I start laying in the heavy penciling, or it's all I put my blacks in, then I put my shading in, and then I start rubbing everything out to give it nice contours. The amount of times I've had someone walk up behind me and go, "What's that? Well, that doesn't look anything like her or him or whatever," right? Just someone being a dick, I can't do it, so I'm going to piss on your thing. I'm always just sitting around and just, whatever. Let's just get all your critiques out right now. Let's have you throw down that I don't know how to draw. Let's do that. And so in about 15 minutes, you're going to be eating a bag of poo, all right? And so when I start filling it in, it goes super duper fast, and all of a sudden it just goes boom, and it's there. It's cool. You can play that game to excite the energy around your project. If people are excited about it because the last thing you did was kind of cool, everyone's kind of weirded out by your first attempt, but you deliver something interesting. Oh, that was really cool. And this doesn't have to be multi-week things or multi-year things. This could be 4 hours in the garage, 4 hours in your little office or something. I know a friend of mine, she works at a grade school, and she's always having to create all the creative decorations in the school. So it comes to Thanksgiving or Halloween or some event, she has to go into Illustrator and she draws up some cool stuff. They have a really nice printer there. She prints it out, hangs it all up, and everybody digs it. So what she did on the side was she started her own design company on the side. Just a little freelance. You write checks directly to her. But she does like your stationery, she does your business cards. Doesn't really do websites or anything, but she does all the hard paper stuff that people need for their companies. Logos, that kind of stuff. Well, she parlayed what she learned to do, having never done it before, being a creative person, first from the schools and then into her private life. And I don't think she feels like she works a day in her life. I happen to know that she has a very regimented daily schedule. She gets up, her whole family gets up at the same time. So she gets up, she does her thing, gets herself ready in the morning, fixes a big thing of coffee or tea or whatever, and then takes it to school, executes at school, comes home, makes sure everybody's fed, and then she's got 3 or 4 hours at night to take care of her private clients. Cool. If she ever wanted to quit the school, she could go into this other thing full time. So it's kind of a cool little backup. Now, I will tell you a little secret about making money with anything that you choose to do. When you go to smoke lounges and smoke these cigars, and if you go between like 2 and 4 o'clock, you will typically bump into self-employed people, usually guys, of course, because it's cigars, and they've got some business. And it's one of these etiquette things that, depending on how open they are that particular day, because some people go and they just want to crawl on their phones and get some business done or chill out, watch TV, you don't bother them. If they start chatting with you and start asking you what you do, it's obviously the etiquette to return the question. Well, what do you do? And the funny thing is sometimes the most creative people are the most broke people on planet Earth. I have played that role so many times in my life, okay? But the dude who, this is a common thing. I just want you to think this thing through, because this might be a backup plan to finance your more creative, less lucrative plan. The people that make the most money on this planet that I know of are people that engage in very basic functions in society. They'll have, because I'll give you an example. Some dude might say, hey, well, what do you do? You know, like, I make nuts and bolts for a living. What? Oh, we have a machine shop. We make all kinds of nuts and bolts and all kinds of little pieces and parts for people. What he's not telling you is the guy's making $10 million a year because he's got contracts with the Air Force, with big giant corporations like Caterpillar or something, and they're making a part that, even though it might look boring, which if you love machining, it's not boring for you. I've got a buddy of mine who's an expert machinist. He loves it, right? He's minimizing it because it's not a rock star career in the eyes of the people, but it makes a ton of money. One of my friend's grandfathers, he ended up dominating real estate in my hometown. So much so that he's been dead for, 20 years, 25 years. No, at least 25 years, if not 30. He's been dead for that long. His family did continue the business, but they moved out of that town 20 years ago. And if you still drive through my hometown, all of the property signs are this dude's last name. Because he's so legendary, they wouldn't get rid of his last name. Now, I know he made a ton of money on that. But what did he also do? For some reason, on the side, he created what's called skids. Skids are these little triangle plates that you can put a big, long pipe on top of for irrigation, oil, whatever. If it's a pipe, it needs to be stabilized on the ground. So he built a triangle with little concave divot at the top that the pipe lies inside of. Of course, it's different diameters, different skid sizes. This thing's a little multi-million-dollar business on the side. So he used his real estate business, which definitely paid the bills. It was not hurting for cash, but I'm sure it didn't start that way. It took him probably 30 years to build up the business, which he then handed off to his 4 kids, 3 of which engage in that business today and 1 ignored it. But the skid company keeps everybody paid. It's still going super duper strong. He found a niche that was really great. So maybe your goal is a niche business like that, and you understand money and you understand demand. One of my ex-girlfriends, her husband that she divorced just before I met her, very amicably so, dude's nearly a billionaire. Okay, so what did he do to make his money? Well, he was a middleman between countries, between big giant corporations to buy precious metals. So he'd fly to one weird place in the world and digs titanium out of the ground or whatever, makes it titanium, and he'd sell it to some other country. Well, these are multi-billion-dollar purchases that these countries are doing, these companies are doing, and he gets a percentage of it. And so he'd been doing that for, like 50 years. Now, in that particular kind of business, you got to know some people, you got to be pretty tenacious. I met a 19-year-old kid once who, for the time being, was rolling in a ton of cash. I think he was, his personality was getting him elected out of the business. But he was moving oil tankers. He'd found the artery to call someone up and say, I hear you need oil. Yep. Well, I'm brokering a few tanker vehicles that are going to be coming in your area. Do you want them? Yeah, sure. All right. He makes the phone call the other way. He gets a commission off of it. The kid's 19 years old. Stranger things, man. They can happen. If money is your goal, one of the things I want to encourage you to do is think about big ideas. I got a whole episode on big ideas. One of the curses of pop culture is that they try to make you feel like people are way above you, like they're royalty or something. The Lady of the Lake gave them the sword of Excalibur or something. So they're endowed by God to be rich, and you're not. They're special DNA. You're not special DNA. Well, if you made it this far into this video, you're special DNA. You have an attention span. You have an intelligence to you. So you're ready to go. Now you just need your big idea. So sometimes you can muscle your way into an industry that you would never think that you have any right being into. But that's propaganda in your brain. Make sure you shed as many paradigms as you can since you grew up so that you can free your mind. You know, there's philosophers that say that we only get dumber as we get older because we lock ourselves in more boxes and more boxes, adopting all this other stuff. One of the kisses of death while you're trying to live your life and getting a bunch of things done is that you'll hear a bunch of catchphrases about being old. If you walk around saying that you're old, guess what's going to happen to your DNA? One of the things I learned as a very young kid, which I couldn't put together in my brain because I didn't have a more existential mind when I was a child to have a paradigm to even think about this, was there was always a kid at school that was sick all the time. This kid would catch everything that was ever going around, and not just like little things like the flu and the cold. This dude would have, something huge. Something, couldn't even pronounce. It didn't have a little name. It was like a big, giant scientific name. And then on occasion, I would find myself following these kids to their house. They'd invite me over, whatever, or they'd come to the school for some event, and the whole family's like that. The whole family's constantly hypochondriacting into everything. If they read a definition of a disease, they had it, Very susceptible to pharmaceutical propaganda, which, believe me, is a big business, okay? You don't want to do that to yourself. If you are part of a family that does that, well, and just in 5 seconds of realization, you can start digging yourself out of that one. Some people like telling you that they're sick. Man, they just go to the doctor all the time, and The second you say, how you doing, man? It's like, well, I got this thing removed from my face, and I got cancer on the tip of my nose, and my butt won't work anymore, and blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, whoa, ho, 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 what, really? What, did you get hit by a Mack truck? Like, what's going on with you, man? Are you that little kid in a pet cemetery all stitched back up, and you were buried out in the sour land? Like, what's going on with your body here, right? We had a kid in my hometown. Great kid from a great family. His father was my geometry teacher. His name's Kevin Olson. I'll say that because he has a book out there. You can look this kid up. He was bringing a boat in to a dock, and he needed to tie off the boat. He says, I'll get it. He's a good kid. He jumps out of the boat and dives in the water. Unfortunately, there were rocks right there. And in that one dive, he broke his neck. And from that moment forward in his life, he's been a quadriplegic. It was utterly devastating to everybody because Kevin's an amazing kid before this happened. His father's a great guy. I mean, he's a copy of his dad. Just two great human beings. And so our hearts were just destroyed. So Kevin obviously had to do some recovery, which we all missed, but he wrote a book about it. But he now tours schools. He's got an incredible wife, which actually was his caregiver as part of his rehabilitation. They just met and hit it off. She's amazing. He's amazing. This dude is one of those guys. And probably all of you, if you've been to grade school in America, they always tour people like this through the schools so we don't feel like we can't do things. And this is a good little end bumper to this episode. I believe there's a gentleman out there, and I do not know his name. There's a bunch of people like this. But there's a gentleman, and I don't know if he's American or not, but he was born without arms and legs. And so he has never known what it's like to have arms and legs. And so for him, he never missed anything. He looks at people with arms and legs, and he's like, yeah, that looks pretty easy. But he can get everything done himself. Dresses himself. He can light a cigarette. I mean, it's amazing. He does like all kinds of crazy stuff like that. There's a bunch of people learned that trick way back in the day. But he's an inspirational speaker. Super brilliant guy. Great personality. He's just really super balanced. I've seen him a few times on YouTube. So how many of you have seen one of those situations? And it's always, usually those videos are titled in social media like, if you thought you couldn't, do anything, or if you're making excuses why you can't do something in your life, look at this guy, look at this girl. And you realize, yeah, I got no excuses. So it depends on if those stories affect you, whether or not those are good little inspirational things. But sometimes that's all you need is a little reminder. The other little thing that happens with people, and you probably either know of a story of this, or you know someone who's had this experience, or maybe a few of you have actually had this experience yourself. You end up in a near-death situation, and you survive. Sort of like Kevin, but, imagine you go through an experience as traumatic as Kevin's experience, but you don't break your neck. Or if you did, it heals up and you're okay. You can still use your arms and your legs, and you're back to normal. Like some of those boxers that have broken their necks. Okay. These folks will look at life different for the rest of their lives. They're like, man, I'm just glad I'm every day I wake up and I'm breathing. I thank God. And it usually is preceded by these near-death experiences where they realized, oh my gosh, I'm a young person. Doesn't matter how old you are. And you're like, I got plenty of life left. Doesn't matter how old you are. It's good to remember these things when you're about to go into the genesis of a new project. And there's been a few people in life that have said what I'm about to say. Last time I said it, I got a bunch of good positive comments. Ross Perot, when that dude ran for president way back in the early 90s, he was quoted as saying, he was a multi-billionaire before he died. He said, saving up for what you want to buy sometimes is way more satisfying than buying the product that you eventually wanted in the end. Gene Simmons of Kiss, he was very fortunate to work his butt off with the other three guys and create an amazing band in the early 70s. But he also said, look, I don't use credit cards. I only buy what I can afford. So if I want something that I can't afford, I don't use credit. I just go work harder, which for him, obviously, he was fortunate. He really worked hard, and his luck was working hard and getting talented at whatever he did. And regardless if you like Kiss or not, you should know that in the 70s, they were next to demigods on earth. I mean, everyone loved the entire vibe that place or that band put off. The other thing I want to stress, just as we're wrapping this thing up, is that old phrase that you get back what you put out. Obviously, 2020 has been really daunting for a lot of us on so many levels, social levels, work levels, all that kind of stuff. You can get into a rut in your life, irrespective of crises that might be plaguing the world through a phone call. And you'll start echoing that sentiment to the world. Gosh, I don't even know if I want to live anymore. I don't, whatever. You go all different directions with that cynicism. If you're going to jump into something, understand a couple things. One, if you start doing something for any one of your dreams that are out there, it's invigorating. It will erase your time to spend ingesting the propaganda from social media, for one thing. But another thing is just every second you're moving the ball forward, even if you have certain setbacks and things, because they'll happen. Gosh, I thought this was going to be like a 1 hour thing. It's turning into like a 1 month thing. Well, guess what, man? You're getting it done. Don't worry about how much time it takes. Like I always tell people that want to lose weight, they want their body to be smaller, right? That's what they really want. They want their body to be smaller. I had a buddy of mine who was my kid's band teacher. Sweetest guy, nicest guy, brilliant guy, super talented. For whatever reason, he gained a bunch of weight over the years. He needs to lose, I think, per his own admission, at least 100 pounds still. But he was talking about the weight scale. Well, gosh, I do this and that and this, and the thing doesn't show me losing any weight. So the weight scale is giving him a failure based on his goal, because he's equated the weight scale to actually making his body smaller. Well, we all know the muscle weighs way more than fat. And a cubic container of 1 pound of fat is about the size of a shoebox. Okay? So 1 pound of fat is a gigantic amount of fat in your body. So you could lose 1 pound and you lost a shoebox off your body. Disneyland has this display, or had this display in the Imaginarium, which is next to Space Mountain here in Anaheim. And for whatever reason, it was this weird display of how much fat weighs. And they had like fat in these containers. And man, it was phenomenal just to see that fat weighs a lot. So don't worry about the weight scale. Just look in the mirror. If you cheated a couple days in a row, well, you're not going to go down in size. You may not gain any size, but you're not going to go down. But if you start eating right, exercising will definitely tone your muscles underneath the fat, but you can exercise all you want. If you're not exercising enough to burn that big container of fat off, not much is going to change. You'll be super healthy underneath your weight. But if you want to make yourself smaller, that's all you need to do. Just look in the mirror. Being naked, boy, that's one that really hits me. I'll go, oh my gosh, I need to get rid of this winter weight or whatever I'm doing. So as you go and get your goal, there's a lot of things that you let into your brain that shouldn't be in your brain, that give you a sense of failure. But you're not failing. As long as you move that football 1 millimeter towards the end zone, you are closer to the end zone today. The other thing is if you have ever stressed about putting off something that turned into a never, and you re-engage it, here's what's great. You will go to sleep if you have a good day of moving that ball forward. And you don't even know how far you moved it, but you know you did. You get addicted to that. You will get addicted to your project. Now remember, you're going to have a point, maybe, if it's your first time ever doing what you're trying to do, where it's going to seem impossible, but just realize at that point, you are super duper close to cracking it, meaning the difficulty rating is going to soar to the ground, and it's just cruise control all the way to the end. And it might be a little nerve-wracking, like my intro. I spent an extra 2 months on the intro that I didn't schedule. I was very happy with the way it ended up with the time I had to do it. The other beautiful thing on that note about not sharing your project with anyone until you get it to critical mass, meaning you're damn near done, you're just in the polish phase, is the following. how does someone critique what you do? How does someone take the steam out of what you do? If you happen to have someone around you that you love dearly, could even be your kids. You can't get rid of your kids, right? And they don't understand what you're doing. There's something I put in my parenting episode way back in season 1, which is definitely communicate with your children and your spouse if you're going to be disappearing for a certain number of hours. Let them know generally what you're doing. Say, Daddy's working on something really interesting. Mommy's doing something, I'm experimenting with the project, and I'm not ready to share it yet, but I'm going to be, when I'm in that office, please knock on the door before you come in. And if you can, just stay out and watch your TV or whatever you're going to do, work on your projects, do that. But if you need me, I'm here, I love you, that kind of thing. But if you don't share your projects, no one takes a piss on it until you're ready to go. I used to really struggle explaining my films to people. Like, I'd have the film nearly done, and someone would be like, well, what's your film about? And I'd start explaining it, and I just watch, deer eyes on their face, like, oh, dude, I'm lost. I don't even know where you are. It sounds like too much to fit in a movie. It's funny. I finally got better at it. But I found out that it's like, until I can read it to them, I don't share it. I say that I'm writing a film. I give them a genre. I'm writing a romantic comedy. Oh, okay. And that's it. That they're good. They don't need to hear anything else. Some of your friends can listen to you do what you do if you're going to write something like that or create something of writing. But a lot of times no one can conceive of what you're doing. Let's say you're building a robot and you're like, you bring him into your office and you're 5 days away from putting all the pieces together and it's going to look exactly the way you look, and you've knocked it out of the park. Some of these parts and pieces are utterly brilliant. You've actually had it together before when they weren't there, but now you're disassembling because you want to fix a few things. Don't invite them into the room until you can put it all together and say, you pull like a Steve Jobs, you put a black piece of cloth on and you're like, you ready? And the whole family's like, yes. And you go, foof. Oh my God, the amount of adrenaline and dopamine that's going to fly through their body when they see what you've done will be amazing. Maybe you're a musician, you go, tink, play. And you got the stereo set up perfectly, headphones are perfect or whatever it is, and you become an entertainer. And when your hard work makes people happy, it'll make you thrill beyond your wildest dreams. For anybody who liked the intro, and you said so in the comments, I definitely love to hear that you liked it. Now, when you don't like it, I understand as well, because everybody's different. Again, write a few albums of music and then give it to your friends, and you'll find out that some of your friends hate songs, and those your other friends love those songs and hate the ones your other friends loved. I mean, it just happens. So once you learn that that's just the way an audience works, you won't get hurt inside that someone doesn't understand what you did. So anyway, I hope this was useful to you. It's now 4:50 at night, so in the morning, so I must go inside and get some sleep. So if you haven't been to Deep Thoughts Radio, just go. All the stuff's on there. There's a search field on there. Remember, season 1's been remastered. But you have video, audio, social media, ways to contribute to the show. But until next time, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.